Um, Today's talk is on the Bhaddekaratta Sutta, the sutta on what constitutes an auspicious day for those of us in Dhamma practice. And it really is a day that is rooted in refined mindfulness developed through the Eightfold Path. But today is also an important anniversary, 17 years since the attacks of 9/11. And I thought I'd talk a little bit about it. I try to avoid getting into too much political talk, and I think I do a pretty good job of it. But this sutta, it struck me today, this sutta relates so directly to what occurred then and the Buddha's awakening. On 9/11 of that year, I was in Robert Wood Johnson Hospital, and an opioid-induced haze had broken my back on September 4th, and they airlifted me down there. And I remember laying in bed. I still hadn't regained use of my legs at all, but my hands came back, so I was feeling okay. And it was around 9:30 in the morning. There wasn't much else to do but lay in bed and stare at the TV. And I think it was CNN that was on. I saw this plane run into the World Trade Center. And I'm thinking, what is this movie? I don't remember even going to a movie. What's this movie? Because it was so unreal, I'm sure, to every one of you until you realize the reality of the situation. This doesn't happen. This can't happen in my country, and et cetera, et cetera. And then the place exploded, and that was Robert Wood is a level 1 trauma center. So they immediately got word to start expecting what they thought would be tens of thousands of casualties. And they started alerting the patients that, your care might be limited for a good deal of time while we take these people. Anyway, that never materialized. I don't think they ever got anybody. And thankfully, the casualties weren't what they expected at first. And at the time, I had no frame of reference. I was involved in the Buddhist teachings. I understood it to a certain extent, but I was so whacked out on the opioids that thinking any type of refined thought was way beyond my means at the time. But coming to grips with it later, and again, even thinking about it today, I realized how strikingly similar what I was seeing on TV that day was exactly what the Buddha described when he first awakened and looked out on the world, as described in the Loka Sutta. So there's no way of knowing in the chronology of the Buddha's teaching when he actually taught the Loka Sutta for the first time, but I'm thinking it's fairly early in his teaching career. And in the Loka, I won't go through the whole sutta, and you've heard me talk about this often. When the Buddha first looked out on the world from his awakened right view, meaning understanding the nature of suffering is rooted in ignorance of Four Noble Truths. When he first looked out on the world, he declared that the world is a flame. And 2,600 years later, we can look out on the world and say exactly the same thing. And not to diminish what happened 17 years ago today. And I wasn't even thinking about saying this way. But historically, it could be expected, couldn't it? That makes me sad to even say that. We haven't come all that far in 2,600 years, have we? And the problem is still ignorance of the way things are. And I'm talking about not global ignorance, because that's how pervasive it is, but individual ignorance of the nature of confusion, deluded thinking, and ongoing unsatisfactory experiences is what caused those folks to think that it was the right thing to do to fly those planes into the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, and in a field in Pennsylvania. They believed in what they were doing. No matter how outrageous to us that thinking may seem, and I think it does seem that way to all of us, they believed they were right. And that same type of ignorance of Four Noble Truths is the same type of ignorance that creates conflict in our own minds. Hopefully it doesn't get to that type of level where we can justify that level of violence. But it's still the same problem. And the solution is still the same. And when we realize how fortunate I am to have found something that actually addresses the problem of conflict in my own mind to such an extent that I can eliminate it, That's an auspicious day, an auspicious Dhamma. And so that's, I guess, my lead-in into this. We're all concerned about the conditions of the world today. And whatever the condition is, in the present moment, it always seems most immediate, meaning more immediate than it was 17 years ago. But the immediacy isn't into external events. The immediacy is to our own awakening. Remember Bahia. He knew the dangers of impermanence and what was coming around the next corner. He didn't know it was going to be a cow that was going to get him, but he knew the nature of impermanence. None of us know how much time we have to awaken, but the sutta points to how auspicious this day is, because it is an opportunity to awaken. The Buddha was staying at Savatthi, at Jita's Grove, Anatha Pandika's monastery. There he addressed those gathered. Friends, I will teach you the meaning of an auspicious day. Do not chase after the past or project your thoughts onto the future. That's one of those Buddhist sayings that are actually true, and we see floating around here and there. Not entangled with the world, be mindfully only of what is occurring. The essence of the Dhamma. Not being entangled in the world is developing the refined mindfulness, so we stop taking anything personal. Free of distraction, well concentrated. Develop compassion informed by wisdom. Not just develop compassion, but compassion informed by wisdom. You could say that those folks that hijacked the planes were acting from their own point of view of compassion, weren't they? Look what it drove them to do. There was no wisdom in their compassion. Mindfully engage with what is skillful. What the Buddha is referring to, mindfully engaging in the Eightfold Path. That's what is skillful. The future is uncertain, and death occurs equally for all. A caution. Same caution that Bahia understood. Those who remain mindfully engaged with life as life occurs throughout the day have had a truly auspicious day. What a remarkable statement. No matter what may have occurred during our 24 hours or 18 hours, whatever it is that we're awake, it's a truly auspicious day if we framed it by the Eightfold Path, by having maintained that refined mindfulness and the concentration developed through our meditation practice. This is a true refuge, meaning the Dhamma. But what we have here is a true refuge too, isn't it? As the Buddha describes a refuge, an understanding that an awakened human being actually developed awakening, full human maturity, and that he left his Dhamma so that we could all do the same thing, provided we were fortunate enough to be part of a well-focused sangha. Triple gems. The Buddha continues. And how does one avoid chasing after the past? One does not get carried away with the delight that in the past I had such a form or a body, in the past I had such a feeling, in the past I had such a perception, in the past I had such a fabrication, in the past I had such a consciousness. This all relates to our immediate past in this lifetime, maybe thinking, I had such a wonderful day yesterday, how come I feel like this today? Or I'm so glad I'm not stuck in what was occurring yesterday because now I'm free of it. Or equally as distracting, getting distracted towards thinking about who I might have been in a past life. The Buddha refers to this often. Excuse me. There's some common thought in modern Buddhism that the definition of an awakened human being is one who has complete remembrance of all their manifold past lives. And that's never what the Buddha taught. In fact, the Buddha often taught this way, to be cautious of putting any significance on past memories, whether it's of a past life or what occurred in 5 minutes ago. They're all rooted in impermanence. If they are occurring to a mind rooted in ignorance, then our remembrance and our perception of what occurred in the past, whether it's a past life or a past 5 minutes ago, is still being interpreted from that ignorance. In other words, it can't be trusted. It's of no value. It's like foam on the ocean. Let it go. So that's what the Buddha is referring to. Let go of the past. It's only by carrying on to it or clinging to it that the past can affect our present moment and likely what's going to occur in the future also. This is called not chasing after the past. And how does one not project their thoughts onto the future? One does not get carried away with delight that in the future I might have such a form, in the future I may have such a feeling, in the future I might have such a perception, in the future I might have such a fabrication, in the future I might have such a consciousness. And again, that can be in the next moment. I'm doing something right now that's going to make me so much better or give me a better feeling in the next moment. That could be taking a drink or a drug, or it could be having a conversation or doing anything. If the action is rooted in changing how I might feel in the future, we've lost our minds, haven't we? We're not in the present moment. We're not in life as life occurs. And we're not able to realize the auspiciousness of every single moment. You've heard me say often that refined mindfulness allows us to be mindfully engaged with life as life occurs. And that is its own reward, to simply be living your life, having a mind united with its form, with the body, and fully present, free of the need for anything to be different than it is. That's an auspicious day. There's a comment there that I just gave, so I'll leave it out. The Buddha continues, and how does one become entangled with the world? An uninstructed ordinary person, lacking understanding of the Dhamma, sees form as the self or sees self as the form. Remember, the Buddha also described the ongoing personal experience of suffering as the 5 clinging aggregates, the first aggregate being form. Confused, they see feeling as self or the self as possessing feelings, the second factor of the 5 clinging aggregates. Still confused, they see their perceptions as the self or as the self possessing perceptions. Now, he's just simply describing something that we do all the time to ourselves and towards others. We're saying that because I see something a certain way, that's my reality. And of course, we give that credence by reinforcing that in other people, either through our associations or engaging in argument that further entrenches people in their perceptions, or the next caution that the Buddha gives, fabrications. Confused, they see their fabrications as self or their self as fabrications. Further confused, they see their consciousness as self or their self as their consciousness. Of course, that's the ultimate issue, isn't it? To recognize that just because I'm having a thought does not give that thought authority or doesn't make it real, although most of us would insist that it is. Simply because that great phrase or saying, I think, therefore I am, one of the most misleading phrases of all time, and yet it's still around all these many years later as almost as a credo. But the Buddha realized that it is because my thinking is rooted in ignorance of Four Noble Truths. Whatever I see is fabricated from that ignorance. It simply can't be trusted, and it shouldn't be trusted. And how do we know? Look at the conflict in our own minds. Look at the confusion. We often wonder why I'm holding in mind the way that I think I should think, and yet I'm still confused and conflicted by what I'm thinking. It's because it's rooted in the wrong view of the way things truly are. And what is that view? Is it some grand, mystical, almost impossible to understand view? No. It's simply understanding 3 marks of existence. That everything, including this form, including my thoughts, my perceptions, my fabrications, and this ongoing thinking, are all rooted in impermanence. And what I'm objectifying from that ignorance is also impermanent. And the best saying I heard in reference to that is by Lao Tzu. Once you recognize the impermanence of all things, you'll let go of everything. But most importantly, as the Buddha teaches, we'll recognize and abandon ultimately all wrong views rooted in ignorance of Four Noble Truths. That's his entire teaching. That's an auspicious day. And it's not just a culmination of the path that defines an auspicious day. Simply being engaged in the path is an auspicious day. Let me just go back that one line. Excuse me. Confused, they see their consciousness as self or their self as their consciousness. And that really is the problem. We define ourselves, who we are, to ourselves. Not, we do it to the outer world, but by the way we're thinking. And oftentimes, if we're thinking unpleasant thoughts about ourselves, we'll feel that way. Those types of self-referential views taken to extremes are the foundation of psychoses, aren't they? I mean, we know that from the psychological models that we've developed. It's ultimately the way we think of ourselves. Now, of course, environment has a lot to do with ultimately how we think about ourselves. And some people's environment or upbringing was so egregious that it led to very difficult qualities of mind and even mental illness. But the root effect of that is how I think about myself in relation to the world. And I should qualify what I'm saying right here. I am not saying that the Eightfold Path is the cure for every type of mental illness out there. That's a dangerous and extreme thought or declaration. But underlying, in some ways, people are so caught up in their mental illnesses or views of themselves that they do need mindful therapeutic intervention. It helps and saves a lot of people. But at some point, we get to the realization that it's the way I'm thinking that is the cause of all my problems. And what an auspicious day when I can get to the point of recognizing that the way to change that is simply by direct engagement with the Eightfold Path. Lorna, do you have a question or comment? Or just... The Buddha continues, this is what is meant by becoming entangled with the world. And how is one not entangled with the world? A follower of the Dhamma, who is well-versed and well-trained in the Dhamma, does not see form as self or the self as possessing form. With right view established, they do not see feeling as the self or the self as possessing feelings. In other words, we'll stop blaming others, the world, or ourselves for the way we feel and simply recognize it as a feeling, as a temporary state that is arising and passing away. The four foundations of mindfulness are the Buddha's instructions on what to do with feelings during on our cushion and both off our cushion, feelings and thoughts. With right view established, they do not see perceptions as self or as a self possessing perceptions. With right view established, they do not see fabrications as self or as a self possessing fabrications. With right view established, they do not see consciousness as the self or as a self possessing consciousness. This is called not being entangled with the world. A direct teachings on how to not be entangled with the world, to stop taking the things of the world, the people, events of the world in a personal way. Another way of stating that is when things occur that seem to get our attention, to remind ourselves, this is not me, this is not mine, this is not who I am. And very often, the attachment simply vanishes, doesn't it? Yes? Did you say no, Frank?
Yeah, no.
No? Doesn't work?
Vanish. It doesn't vanish. And that's the thing that, how do you do it? How do you make it vanish?
What's the magician's trick?
When you're entangled in the world, you don't have that refuge to go out into the forest and live your life, and you're kind of stuck in the entanglements.
Yeah.
And it's constant detaching from the lies, the manipulation, the personalities, the psychosis, the neurosis, all that stuff that's being fed, on an 8 to 10 hour day, every day. And then you go home and then you have that stuff in your own family to deal with, and thank God there's a sangha to come to.
Exactly.
And a Dhamma to listen to and a cushion to sit on.
Yeah. Thank you for saying all that. Yeah, just because it's simple, and I say this often, it doesn't mean that it's easy, and it takes concerted right effort. That seventh factor of the eightfold, sixth factor of the Eightfold Path, to remind us how difficult it is. It's much easier if we are, like the original sangha, able to leave the world behind and just, create this other refuge. But we do have the refuge here, and again, this is one of the most remarkable things to me is what has developed here in Frenchtown. It's a well-focused Dhamma that's not into other things. We at least while we're here, we're able to have an environment where we are free of the entanglements of the world.
But it's like the pain is a pretty good reminder of how close the entanglements really are.
Yeah. Yeah, and we know it, don't we? When we're able to get to that, just a little bit of a measure of concentration. The reason why a right meditation practice is so important is because that allows us to see when we're entangled. We just went through this series on the wisdom of restraint. And this is, kind of in the tail end of that too. How do we practice restraint? At the point of contact, when we find something arising within us, a feeling or a thought attached to a feeling is an emotion. When we feel the quality of our mind changing from maybe a peaceful state to a less than peaceful state, we know we've taken something personal. And to come back as best, and sometimes we're in the middle of it and we're not able to remove ourselves to take refuge in that moment. That's where the refuge we develop on our cushion is so supportive of our cushion. But even then, it might not be enough. Even then, we might have to just do the best we can in a situation, which might mean we react poorly. But we're mindful of that. Because how do we know? Because we've developed the Eightfold Path to a certain extent where we are mindful of right speech, right action, and right livelihood, or when we're not acting in accordance with those. We simply know it. And what do? It just helps to remind us what an auspicious day to remember what I need to do to eventually end all conflict in my mind by ending all ignorance. Frank, you had another comment?
I did. I really forget what it was. I think what I was going to say was when I'm feeling that pain that I was talking about, and I'm caught up in it, and I recognize it, it's like I'm trying to learn how to be tolerant of that pain so it doesn't cause a reaction. Because the first thing I want to do is fix it. The first thing I want to do is push it away or fix it.
Yeah.
And or blame somebody out there for causing it.
Yeah.
So that's like the learning curve right there for me, and I like the word vanish because I can imagine vanish.
Well, and you use the word tolerance. That's another word that the Buddha uses. Is excuse me. Tolerance for others and how they're acting. Lauren touched on this Saturday too. We had a really great class after that. And tolerance for ourselves when we're acting in less than perfect Dhamma. That's another way of saying it is be gentle with yourself, because you likely won't always hear the Dhamma and immediately be able to practice it. Another way that I say it is to learn to be at peace with less than peaceful mind states, to not react to what's already causing a disturbance in your mind. And that's really how we react, how we act within the framework of the Eightfold Path. Excuse me. And allow what's giving rise to vanish. It's by reacting to something in one way or another that we attach ourselves to it and continue it. It's by not reacting, simply observing, being mindfully present with life as life occurs, that things move through impermanence. There's nothing we need to do. Of course, again, the practical thing that might come up, well, what do you do when someone's in your face and they're screaming at you and calling you names? If there's no resolution, you walk away, and that's okay too. That's fine. We're not here to force ourselves or force a situation just to prove that we're above it all. Doesn't make any sense. The Buddha continues. To develop an auspicious day, remain present with your life as your life occurs. Do not chase the past or project your thoughts to the future. Remain free of entanglements with the world and mindful of what is occurring. Be mindful of impermanence and uncertainty. Those that do so will have an auspicious day. I love the way he concludes this. So says this peaceful sage. So says this peaceful sage. Isn't that remarkable? How to do it? Again, it's another one of those suttas that you need to have the overarching context of what the Buddha taught. But he teaches us so clearly how to have an auspicious day. Hold in mind the Dhamma. And then no matter what occurs, again, just to bring it back 17 years, whether it's a plane hitting things it shouldn't hit, or it's a simple disappointment with a loved one, or maybe we saw something on TV, our minds are at peace. And that's the ultimate reward of Dhamma practice, isn't it? And imagine being able to have a human life, moment by moment, that is free of conflicting thoughts. It's the greatest gift, isn't it? But it's a gift we give ourselves. It's not something bestowed on us. And we're in complete control of when we can give ourselves a gift, aren't we? Simply take to the Dhamma and give ourselves an auspicious day. We all have today anyway, so thank you. There's my second talk today. Any questions about today's talk, and then we'll go around the room? We'll start with Lorna. Good to see you tonight.
Good evening, everyone. I think I heard a little bit more clearly today that if my mind is upset, well, it's my thinking that's wrong. My mind is disturbed. It's my thinking that is wrong.
Ultimately.
When you're out there in the world, it frequently happens, but you don't see it that way. You're just caught up in the moment. But I always find that these lessons that you learn when you come to your talks, John, that if you can just learn a little bit of the lesson, just learn it and understand it, it's a treasure, And then, for instance, just just deeply realizing that if my mind is disturbed, it is my thinking that is wrong.
Yeah.
Period. I'm just learning that.
Yeah, that punctuation mark is so important.
Yeah, that's it. I was thinking of, previously read the Auspicious Day, and I would, when I look to my day to see if I've had an auspicious day, I look to see if I can have a busy body and a quiet mind. Meaning it's easy to quiet your mind on the cushion. Well, not easy, even that's not easy. Easier to quiet your mind when your body is still, you're in a quiet environment, etc., etc. It's easier to quiet your mind. It's much more difficult when your body, you're actually performing a task with your body, and to have a quiet mind while you're performing a task, physical task. Once or twice I think I've done that. Had a quiet mind while I'm performing a physical task. And I think if I was to sort of highlight a point of my day, like an auspicious moment, if I could pull that all together, I think that would be an auspicious moment in the day. That's probably what I would look for.
Oh, and that's an example in that moment of a mind united in your body, and it's often doing something physically, especially if it's extreme, but not necessarily, that our minds leave our bodies, and our bodies going ahead doing one thing, and our minds are elsewhere. And so the way to do that is to bring that concentration we've developed on our cushion and bring it into that moment. And it won't always work, but that's all right too. Yeah. Thank you. Ron, good to see you tonight.
Yeah. While you were talking about the 9/11 happenings, I was remembering how our reaction to that event, those events, were equally. As a nation, we started a war in Afghanistan that's still going on, still dying, and it's pure ignorance that drove us there. And I remember, the pickup trucks racing around with big American flags on them, and thinking, what is that going to do? And the anxiety and the fear that came up in a lot of people. And all these things were reactions just rooted in really not understanding the reality of this. And it's occasionally you'll see a glimpse here and there of people that have a better understanding of what, all the impermanence that came up for us at that time.
Yeah.
That people are now finally starting to accept that, yes, or the situation at that time just changed. And your impermanence.
Yeah.
It's not going to go back to where it was before that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That was it continues to be a significant date in our psyches, not just a historical event. It's changed the way people think and feel from the initial reaction, and also lacking, talking in general, lacking the proper framework for seeing what occurred.
And even lacking the proper framework for not even thinking of the possibility.
Yeah.
That just disregarded all that was out there, the hostility that's already there towards our way of life. We just disregarded it.
Yeah, we tend to do that with whatever's immediate. In other words, that same situation, not exactly, has been occurring apparently since at least the Buddha's time, and we know historically before that. That's just it's the nature of extreme views rooted in ignorance will eventually and unfortunately much too often lead to rather extreme violence. That again, so that situation would happen 17 years ago. It's still happening today. I read somewhere that just the United States alone is involved in 130, and I remember the exact number, and 130, maybe use the mild word skirmishes, but they're really wars somewhere. But that's not just, the point is not just that there's a lot of wars that we're involved in. The point is that there's a lot of wars. Things haven't changed much. Because no matter who won the war, think about whatever war, nobody's ever said, let's stop all this and all develop the Dhamma. It doesn't happen, Frank.
There's a lot of evil out there in the world. And thank God we're living in a country that protects its citizens.
Yeah, no, I mean,
regardless of what goes on, I still feel protected in this country. They have to do something.
Yeah, no, I think that it's an extreme view that much too many people take, that the United States is just pure evil. And if you look at what this is our country. We all support it through votes and tax dollars. That's really how it comes. And because of that, we've done so much good in the world too. That's to say we've made a lot of mistakes, and there's things I wish we never did as a country. But there is people are so much better off because of what the United States has done, and we should all look at that too. So, and I guess what I'm saying, not to get too political, is that ignorance prevails in the way that we govern and the way we interact with the world too. That's to be expected, isn't it? Until there's no more ignorance left in our country. But, as I look at, I was a little bit of a student of the Constitution and history and how we came to be, just because it's interesting to me. And this experiment that started so many years ago is still remarkable. And it's still working to a certain extent. And one of the things that's most remarkable to me, I would say that in my lifetime, every president we've had has been a scoundrel in one way or another, except Jimmy Carter. And Jimmy Carter proved to be a very ineffective president. I want to get into again, people would differ with that. The point that I'm making, he's a wonderful man. He's incredible. He's 93 years old and he's still building houses for poor people, him and his wife. he was the most moral and ethical president I think we've ever had. And again, I will say he's most ineffective because he wasn't the right person for what's going on in the world today. That's just the way it is. Again, I don't want to get into a political statement, but this country is still incredible in what it affords its citizens. Every 2 years, we get to vote for people to represent us. Most of us throw it away through ideology and not clear thinking, but many of us are starting to realize how important that is. And then we should also understand that what we contribute to our country has an effect all over the world, good and bad. We should be mindful of that. We do a lot of good in the world. We've ended a lot of wars. We've stopped an awful lot of suffering, and we've caused a lot of suffering. So there's, again, end of the speech. Sorry about that. Andrew, good to see you tonight.
Good evening. This discussion of macro level world disorder is really among ourselves personally. Inside is kind of a micro version of that going on.
Exactly.
When we experience daily annoyances, or disappointments, or pain, and this level, it's even difficult to practice the wisdom of restraint. But having learned that precept, it's possible to intercede and be conscious of it, and then relax the mind as a result of it. It would be a really auspicious day on this micro level if those petty annoyances, whatever it is that gets our dander up, simply be avoided and never reach the point of saying to yourself, oh, I have to practice wisdom of restraint here. But then applied to the world, I mean, that's what happens as well.
Yeah.
It doesn't get applied.
Thank you. And that, as the Dhamma develops within ourselves, we are able to avoid. We develop restraint as a natural expression of who we are, and so we don't get entangled. And that's just part of the Dhamma. It's just how it develops.
That can happen a lot more quickly and naturally, and that becomes an auspicious day.
Yeah, it is. And just imagine, I said this a lot in the last these talks about the wisdom of restraint. Just imagine if our leaders, and I'm not just talking about one guy, if our leaders had developed a measure of restraint, it'd be a lot more pleasant place to live in day to day anyway. So, thank you, Andrew. Good to see you. Mike, good to see you tonight.
Hey, John, good to be here. I hadn't really thought about this in this context until, I guess, probably a couple of days ago, because in the context of taking this class, but I worked in Lower Manhattan on 9/11. I actually went through the Trade Center about an hour before. And so, I mean, I was unbelievably lucky compared to everybody else, but it took me like 8 hours to get home. And I worked up my way up the east side. And I was trying to reach my wife because I thought she was supposed to be working in Midtown, but she didn't make it in. But I finally, the way I was getting home, I waited online for a ferry by the Javits Center for about 3 hours. And I just remember it was such a beautiful day out. Mm-hmm. And I was standing there and just like saying, wow, this is like so crazy that this happened. And it's such a beautiful day, the contrast and everything. And it took me a while to realize that there's lots of beautiful days like that. I only really noticed because I was stuck standing there for 3 hours and kind of shell-shocked. So it was almost kind of like a forced meditation. Like there weren't thoughts going through my head. I was just kind of like, almost like I'm meditating. So I was just appreciating the day. I never spend 20 minutes appreciating a day, let alone 3 hours, but it was kind of forced on me. But I guess, it did stand out, but at the same time, there are days like that every summer. Mm-hmm. And usually I just never stop to notice, but it wasn't, that different from other days. And I guess maybe I should try to notice them more.
Yeah, that's a good goal, to be mindfully present with life as life occurs. And then it doesn't take a bright, shiny day with blue skies to be an auspicious day either. A rainy day or a rainy season like we've been having are just as auspicious days. And I used to spend a lot of time in Hawaii, and the natives always call it rain blessings because it just is. And it's usually not like what's going to hit them. I think they're getting another hurricane. It's usually just a mild, gentle, warm rain. But every day is an auspicious day, depending on how much control I have of my mind. I didn't have many auspicious days. I lived an interesting life until I came to the Dhamma. But now I've had a lot of auspicious days because I, for the most part, think what I want to think when I want to think it. It's remarkable. And we are all developing that same thing. We've all talked about that to a certain extent. And you're going to have 3.5 days to be in that auspicious day. Good for you. Mary, good to see you.
Good to see you. Good to see you. Today was an auspicious day. I happened to be going through security at Philadelphia Airport. I have business there, and they had a moment of silence, a long moment of silence at 5 or 6 or the exact timing. And it was, really well done. And I felt gratitude for the fact that I absolutely had no concern, being there in the airport and the people that were. I felt very safe, and, that I wasn't carrying anything, negative from that time. And there's also a lot of people and a lot of stories about people who quickly became in right view that day and did what needed to be done.
Yeah.
And, there are just so many, many stories. I'm sure we all know them. And, so we were all touched by that day in a wide variety of ways. And then we visited again today. But I think what the sutta is saying is, it really is about the middle way. And in your response, it's like you always say, it was absolutely appropriate to be scared and to be fearful and to be crying and to experience loss during that time. But like those people who saw their way clear to begin helping others, and that was quite sustained.
Yeah.
It wasn't just that day; it lasted for a long time, where people were helping people, and there are lots and lots of stories of that. There's someone in our hometown that started a whole practice around the generosity and love that occurred, and that they wanted to hang on to that and keep it going. And they do they do a lot of acts of kindness and love and giving and taking care of others in a completely volunteer environment. And she was directly impacted, having lost someone in her family. And they started this whole practice in Burnsville. So I think there's a lot of good that happened that day too. People got in right view. I also read a book when my children were little that a woman who had taken Daniel Goleman's emotional intelligence and was asked to come into the public school system, like immediately afterwards, to start teaching emotional intelligence to children in order to help them cope with what had happened. And, because it was bigger than anything they could have even processed. And I read that book, and that influenced how I raised my children. So anyway, lots of good things came from that day. And I think I can recognize when I've had an auspicious day, like sometimes I realize a couple days later now that I've had an auspicious day. Because initially when you're having a direct experience, you're recognizing what is and what isn't, right? You're having that experience in the phenomenal world that something you used to do is no longer there, or a view, or whatever it is. And then it can become a little more commonplace. And then sometimes you realize a couple of days later that was just a normal day. Wow, that was a good normal day. That was an auspicious day. So when that starts to happen more frequently, that's, very nice. Then your concentration is good and your practice is going well and your right effort is in alignment. I love this sutta, so thank you.
Thank you for all those wonderful words. And there was an awful lot of good that came out of that awful day, and it's still reverberating today. There's still funds that are operating to support the families and remembrances of people that lost their lives, and great support there. It's just a wonderful thing that, it's too bad that these things happen, but they do tend to bring out the best in people. What happened here in Frenchtown a couple of weeks ago? The glass was going up. The whole town came together. We get to experience that a lot on our Donna dinner that's coming up. And Matt and I had a little meeting. I'm getting off topic a little bit. We're going to reach out to the different first responders. There was about 5 or 6 different fire departments and rescue squads, and invite them to our dinner,
That's wonderful.
just to show an appreciation for what they did. They really literally saved the town from going up in smoke, because these are all old wooden buildings that if it spread, we were going. Thank you, Harry. David, good to see you tonight.
I'm good tonight, thank you.
Thank you for being here. Kevin, good to see you.
Good to see you. I don't think I have anything else to add. Appreciate the
Yeah, I do too. Thank you. Frank, good to see you as always.
Good to see you, John, and everybody. There's something in the sutta that really stuck out, and it was actually in the introduction part where it says that develop an awakening, as the Buddha defines awakening, is developing a profound understanding of dukkha, and that's personal relationship to what causes your pain and suffering. And I think that's kind of where I'm at in my practice. And if I want to talk about developing the right, the Eightfold Path as part of the awakening process, right action or skillful action, I would consider like these relationships that I bring up from time to time, entanglements. It's skillful, when it's a repetitive thing, to kind of break the chain. And sometimes it's skillful to say goodbye to the relationships, not in a hurtful way, but as a freeing yourself from the entanglement way, because as I'm awakening to my profound understanding of dukkha, a lot of relationships are built on ignorance.
Yeah.
And you can't escape that. There's no vanishing that. That's something that, the human heart is a big clinger. And, and not in a hurtful way, but I mean, sometimes it's just really skillful to say, like, I'm done with this, and it's time to move on.
Yeah.
That's all.
Thank you. What a great phrase. The heart is a big. What heart of is a big
It's
clinger.
a great clinger.
A great clinger. I mean,
Clings on to
that's
things
really true. And it's very difficult to recognize relationships that were very important to us over many years as being hurtful. And and that doesn't mean the person is bad or anything like this, beyond help. It just means that it's hurtful because of what's occurring, and to leave that behind. When I sobered up, I mean, the first thing they told me, this was in rehab when I was 19, so it was about 112 years ago. But one of the most important things they impressed on me was a need to change people, places, and things. The Buddha talks repeatedly about being mindful of our associations, because what he teaches, what I hope I teach, is who and what we associate with is going to determine to a great extent the experience of our life. And it's getting back to that, if I continue to hang around people that were drinking and drugging, I was going to be drinking and drugging. there was a guy way back, Riley Reagan. I still remember his name, and he was within the 12-step community. There's people known as circuit speakers, and they get a reputation. They go around the circuit speaking at all the big events, and he was one of those guys. And he used to tell this story in every speech that he ever gave, and I love listening. He was a great speaker, even though I heard him 100 times. If he was around tonight, I'd go listen to him. And he says, if you're sitting in a room and behind you there's a duck, and to your right there's a duck, and to the left there's a duck, and in front of you there's a duck, it's a pretty good chance you're a duck. The point in relation to the Dhamma, if we're hanging around, and I should say associating with people to a significant extent that are ducks, we're probably ducks. And it's just to be mindful. It doesn't mean that we should run away from the world or run away from people, but to be mindful, to create our relationships based on an auspicious view of the world rather than simply what's there. And we can make choices based on that. It's so important. Thank you for bringing it up. Liz, good to see you.
Good to see you. Good to be here. It makes me think that some days right speech is not saying anything at all.
Yeah.
And doing no harm. So you can be confronted with, a lot of dukkha and just really feel the angst coming from another human being. But if you can just not make it worse, that's an auspicious day sometimes.
Yeah. Thank you, Liz, for saying that. That is, and that's really the essence of the Dhamma. The Buddha spent a lot of time not talking, just being an example of there's nothing to say right now, or not acting. That's the ultimate restraint, isn't it? It takes some wisdom sometimes to know that no matter what I say, it's not going to contribute any benefit to what's occurring. Keep your mouth shut. I may be still learning that. Bonnie, good to see you.
Good to see you too. Thank you for the sutta and practice auspicious stuff.
Thank you, Bonnie. It's one of my favorite suttas. I think the connection to the day today may have moderated the enthusiasm for the sutta, but I think that's appropriate too. Any day we can continue to develop the Dhamma is an auspicious day, and we're so fortunate that we have the teachings as an awakened human being presented them still available to us. It's the ultimate in auspiciousness. Our retreat starts next Thursday, so next Thursday and Saturday there will not be a class. There will be this week. Tomorrow's Wednesday talk is on Sujata. And the only reason I'm bringing it up is Sujata, if you remember the story of the Buddha's near drowning, the young girl that saved him was named Sujata. I've been trying to find a connection between Sujata that saved the Buddha's life and the Sujata who is an awakened bhikkhuni, and I haven't been able to find the connection, but maybe I will. But that's tomorrow's talk. It's
Still a common name.
Yeah, it's a very common name.
Is it really?
Yeah, in India. Maybe because of that. But and Thursday's talk is on the Arahant Sutta. Thursday's class here. And Saturday's, I think, is going to be another class on the Bhaddekaratta Sutta, despite the fact that Lorna will be hearing it for a second time. I've been thinking about that. It just kind of fits in.
I never complain.
Yeah, you don't.
Never complain, John.
And then after retreat, I have some suttas in the queue. One is how the Buddha teaches joy, because so much of the Buddha's teaching is via negativas, focusing on what's the unskillful aspects of human ignorance. But this one, the Buddha describes in rather long detail joy within the Dhamma. And I think that's going to be on the Tuesday after retreat, but it might be a week later. But anyway, coming attractions.
I look forward to that one.
Yeah, I do too. But we'll finish as we always. You know what? I remember this too. I have an online, Lorna heard this. I don't think anybody else had. An online sangha member who put my words to metta to song, and it's really beautiful.
I heard that.
So I'm going to play it tonight. I played it on a Saturday. I need to play it on a Tuesday. So give me just a minute to scare it up. And in the meantime, you could find your relaxed meditative posture. And gently close your eyes and gently close your mouths.
Okay.
And this is our Sangha member Sarah's rendition of my interpretation of metta. Uh-oh.
Make it worse.
Now that I said it. And it,
What I just said. Sorry.
sorry to hold you up, folks. But if I can get it quickly, it'll be worth it. I hope. Yeah, just a moment. Hmm. Almost there. Okay.
May I be well, may I be peaceful and at ease. May I be happy, may I be well. May I be well, may I be peaceful and at ease. May I be
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you all for a wonderful class tonight. Peace.
Thank you.
Okay.